Thank you. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Empower Idaho, for inviting me to be here tonight. I am very excited to speak to everyone. I must admit, virtual presentations are not my preference. I really enjoy being in the same space as other individuals. However, thanks to the pandemic, things really became easier to connect with people outside of your geographic space. So for that, I'm very grateful. And tonight we're going to be talking about something that is really important to me. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have a master's in social work. I also have a master's in public policy. And then later down the line, I became a yoga teacher, completing a 200-hour basic yoga teacher training and then a 300-hour trauma sensitive yoga teacher training, which is part of what I will be talking about today. But I think that it is so important that we learn tools. And that is one of the things that I really work on with my clients is helping them help themselves, right? I don't think therapy is a lifelong commitment. And so part of my goal tonight is that you walk away with some tools that you can apply then to yourself. And maybe you also share them with others because this is something that can benefit anyone. And I don't think we talk about it enough in terms of how we can tap into our own power, our own embodied power to help us regulate. So, and like Barry said, I'm located in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm originally from Mexico City. I identify as Latina. My pronouns are she, her, and I have a small bilingual practice in Savannah, Georgia. Okay, so before I jump into the presentation itself, I would really like to invite you to take a mindful moment. I don't know where you're coming from or what you were in the middle of before joining me tonight. So maybe collectively we can take a moment to drop into our bodies. So most of us spend more time in our mind, right? We're thinking about the future, about the past, about the what ifs, the problems, the to-do list. And so in this moment, there's an invitation to drop into your body. And how do you do that? Well, maybe you take a moment to notice your breath. And you can close your eyes if you want to. Maybe you take your hands and put them on your chest or a place that feels comforting and supportive. Physical touch is very grounding. Sometimes I like to squeeze my arms. And maybe you take a few deep breaths. Maybe this is the first time in your day that you're really paying attention to your body. So maybe you take a deep inhalation through your nose and you sigh it out through your mouth. And maybe you do that one more time, a deep inhalation through your nose and sigh it out through your mouth. And maybe you notice how you're seated on your chair or your bed or wherever you may be, and see if you can get maybe 5 or 10% more comfortable in this moment. And then if your eyes are closed, maybe you flutter them back open. Thank you for sharing this mindful moment with me. If you noticed any shift in how you're feeling right now to when we first started, know that you did that, right? You created that shift in your body by focusing on your body in the present moment, okay? And maybe you didn't notice any shift, but if there was a shift, you did that. So where are we going tonight? This is our agenda for tonight. I will be talking about the window of tolerance, which some of you may be familiar with. I will be describing the 4 trauma or stress responses along with that. I will be defining trauma. I think it's helpful to share a collective definition on trauma. It is one of those buzzwords right now that has been throwing around a lot. And then how does trauma impact our nervous system and our emotional regulation? And then finally, I will talk about specifically trauma-sensitive yoga, what it is and how does it support emotional regulation. And then we will close with a very gentle practice of trauma-sensitive yoga. This is an opportunity for you to participate with me as much or as little as you like. Like Mary said earlier, you're welcome to use the chat box. And Mary knows that if a question comes up that would be helpful for her to ask in the moment, she's welcome to interrupt me and ask the question. Or if you really feel like you would like to say something, please use the raised hand feature, and Mary should be able to see that, and we can call on you so that you can share what you're thinking. Know that if you have a question, you're probably not the only person with that question. And if you have a comment or a shared or an experience that you would like to share, please do so. That really enriches these presentations.
Ruthie, I just
Yes.
wanted to say to everyone, if you don't know where the raised hand feature is, it's under reactions. So it's where the emojis are. And if you use that, it's either in your menu or under more. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Yes. And you're welcome to use other reactions too. If there's something that really resonated with you and you want to do a thumbs up reaction or a heart emoji, please, this is the best way that you can show me that you're listening, is by reacting to what I'm sharing with you tonight. So the window of tolerance, here it is. This is a concept that was developed by psychologist Dan Siegel. And if you're familiar with dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, it's part of what they teach in their skills around emotional regulation. And so your window of tolerance is going to be that space that you see in the middle of your screen that is between the two dotted lines. And this is considered to be your optimal state of arousal. What does that mean? This is where hopefully you are right now. You feel present, grounded, you're able to regulate yourself. I like to say that your mind and your body are communicating, right? So you're having thoughts and you're having feelings, and those things are aligning. You're able to feel your feelings, but not get overwhelmed by your feelings or shut down by your feelings. And so I could say for myself right now, I am in my window of tolerance. I might be a little bit higher on those little yellow lines because I'm presenting, but I'm not in a state of hyperarousal, which is that red area above the window of tolerance. And so in this hyperarousal state, you are now in what is called the fight or flight, which is one of your trauma or stress responses. And this is where you start to feel a lot of anxiety, feel really overwhelmed. You start to maybe have some heart palpitations. This is where a panic or an anxiety attack would occur, if some of you are familiar with that. So this is where you may start hyperventilating, your palms might get sweaty, but it's also the state where you feel maybe really aggressive or angry. So it can also show up in some aggressive behavior and maybe yelling or screaming. So if you ever get into a situation where you're really raising your voice and you normally don't, that would be a hyper-aroused state. Okay, so now you're no longer in your window of tolerance. And then the opposite is also true. If I go below and I find myself outside of my window of tolerance underneath it, that is called hypoarousal. So HYPO, hypoarousal. And this is the freeze or the fawning stage, which when we fawn, it's really the collapse of the nervous system. So, kind of like when a tiger is going to eat its prey and the prey knows that I can't run away, like this is it. They don't only just freeze, but they just collapse, like they let everything go. And there's a dissociative element to this state as well. So this is where you're going to feel some depression. You don't have the same energy that you would in the hyper-aroused state. We feel numb. Sometimes I like to say we ostrich, right? So we go into our beds and pull the covers over our head. We're unable to make decisions. We feel paralyzed. We can also withdraw from our support or from our coworkers. So it's a real shutting down and numbing, right? We're not really feeling our feelings, right? This is a state that sometimes I see my clients come in and say, I don't feel anything, right? So I'm numb. So I would say this is a hypo-aroused state, right? And so both the hyper-arousal and the hypo-arousal are going to be states where you are not thinking clearly, right? And so you might see red when you're in the hyper aroused state, or you might be so down that you can't even think of the possibilities, right? So this is a state of hopelessness, right? So neither one of these states obviously are helpful or ideal. And so what influences our window of tolerance? If you think of the window of tolerance that you just saw as a muscle, this is a space that expands and contracts. Your window of tolerance is not static. And my window of tolerance looks different from your window of tolerance. And my window of tolerance is going to vary at different points throughout my life, but also different points throughout my day. And why is that? Well, this list, right? So genetics is going to influence your window of tolerance. So are you predisposed to anxiety or depression genetically? Like, does your mom have a lot of anxiety? Did your grandparents experience a lot of depression? Right. So genetically, we might have a predisposal to certain states of hyper or hypoarousal. Your history of trauma, right? What happened to you as a child? How high do you score on the ACEs? For those of you who might be familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Assessment, it measures how much trauma, it's one measurement of how much trauma we experience as children. And the higher the number, the more trauma we experienced. And that can really impact how much tolerance you have for distress or difficulty. Your physical health, right? Your physical health in the present moment. Do you experience chronic pain? This is huge because many of us do. And physical pain cuts in half our ability to regulate emotion. Half, right? So right there, you're already at 50%. That's really helpful to understand and to know. Our relationships, especially our closest or most intimate relationships. Who do you come home to every night? Is it a loving, healthy, nurturing relationship? Or is it one that is antagonistic, aggressive, unsafe? Who do you surround yourself with when you're not at work? Work relationships are a little harder because you are in a workplace, but your personal relationships, your friendships, right? Are they healthy or are they toxic? That's going to influence your window of tolerance. Addiction and mental health. And this, I should say, is untreated addiction and mental health, right? So are you experiencing distress around an addictive behavior that is really impeding you to be fully present at work or fully present with your family? Do you have a mental health diagnosis that is not being treated? Maybe a mood disorder, ADHD, and these are things that have solutions, but without the proper medication and therapy, it is very hard to self-regulate. Sleep, right? This is one that will impact our window of tolerance daily. So we really want to make sure that we're getting our good 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It varies person to person, but that's really the window, right? You don't want less than 7, and more than 9 could be a little bit like oversleeping, right? So 7 to 9 is the sweet spot. But again, everyone has their individual needs, but really prioritizing sleep, because we all know what it's like to have little sleep and then have to go to work the next day or have to take an exam or deal with something difficult, right? It just feels so much harder. So sleep, and then with sleep comes nutrition, right? What are we choosing to put in our bodies? Maybe you've heard the saying, we are what we eat, or you are what you digest, really, because sometimes we eat things that we can't digest, but really recognizing that what you put in your body is going to impact how you feel in your body. And so that will also impact your window of tolerance. And then stress, right? Everyday stress. Life is stressful. It is really not possible to live a stress-free life, but it's how do you manage your stress? Are you setting boundaries for yourself? Are you saying no to commitments that you don't need to be a part of? Are you pulling away from the 24-hour news cycle periodically so that you're not overwhelmed by this barrage of news 24/7? Are you working with a budget? Are you trying to be disciplined in how you spend your money? Or is money really tight right now because of unexpected expenses? All that stress is going to impact your window of tolerance as well. And so then we talked a little bit about the stress response when we were looking at the graph of the window of tolerance. But here I wanted to spell it out a little bit more. So we looked at fight and flight, and that's in the hyperaroused state. These will manifest. It's not just the running away or the fighting physically, right? This can manifest in anger, irritability, or aggression. That's the fight state. The flight is more of a pulling away, but also with the anxiety, fear, panic, perfectionism is another manifestation of flight, because we get so caught up in it needing to be perfect that we're not really addressing what is. Okay. And then the next two, the freeze and the fawn, are the hypoarousal states. And again, that freezing can feel like difficulty concentrating, memory problems, depression, dissociation, isolation. And then the fawning, which is that total collapse of the nervous system. And people don't always realize that this is a fawning behavior, but that people pleasing behavior, or putting other people's needs before your own, or that lack of healthy boundaries. It's really like, I'm not worthy, right? You think of like a dying animal that's just succumbing to the tiger. Like, my needs don't matter. Everybody else's needs matter more than mine. Okay. And so these four states are called the trauma or stress responses. And then important to recognize that an overactive trauma or stress response, so if you find yourself in hypoarousal frequently, this can also be common among survivors of trauma, especially those who experience long-term abuse or neglect. So a child can have a high ACE score and not have been beaten or sexually abused, right? Those are always like the big ones. But a child can also experience trauma by being neglected, right? So if this child was ignored, or the parents were so busy with their working multiple jobs, or with other siblings that maybe have special needs, or they're a child of a divorced family, right? So many of our kids fall through their cracks, and this isn't a knock on parents, because life is difficult, but recognizing that some of us have experienced a amount of neglect. And we might think to ourselves, well, I didn't have a bad childhood because I wasn't beaten, or I always had food on the table. But if your emotional needs weren't met, that is also trauma. And so again, coming back to this graph, right? And so now that we know that the fight or flight is going to be that state of hyperarousal. So we're up here seeing red, we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling anxiety or panic, and then going down to that freeze or fawn. And it's not just the depression and the numbing, it can also manifest as the people pleasing, unhealthy, poor boundaries, not prioritizing your needs. Okay, so now what is trauma? Trauma is a psychic wound that hardens you psychologically and then interferes with your ability to grow and develop. Trauma is not what happens to you, but rather it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. And this is a direct quote by Dr. Gabor Mate. And if you're not familiar with him, I encourage you to look him up. He's written a lot of fantastic books. He's a Hungarian-Canadian doctor who's really written a lot about addiction and ADHD, attachment, and his new book is called The Myth of Normal. And I highly recommend that as your next Audible read. But really, trauma is not the event, but it's what happened inside of you as a result of the event. And so the example I'd like to give is maybe Mary and I are in a car crash, right? And the car crash is pretty bad. But Mary walks out of the car crash and she's like, well, I'm glad I didn't die. And then the next day she gets in her car and drives to work. But I walk out of there and I start having nightmares and start having a lot of anxiety. I find that I can't get in my car the next day to drive to work. I'm finding that I can't buy a car at all, period. So what I would say then is that the car accident, as horrific as it was not traumatic for Mary, but it was traumatic for me. Okay. So I stayed stuck. The experience stayed stuck in my body, and I was not able to then continue to grow and develop, right? I'm not able to keep driving. I'm afraid of cars now. Every time I see a car come close to me, I flinch, right? And so that's trauma. And so it's going to vary person to person, again, based on all those experiences, right? All those things that impact our window of tolerance also impact how we respond to the things that happen to us and determine whether something is traumatic or not. Okay, so that's a really helpful way to understand trauma. Trauma is what happened inside of you, not what is happening. Okay, so, and some people say like, wow, that was so traumatic. Well, what do you mean by that, right? Did it affect you internally, or are you just saying that that was a really bad car accident or a really bad explosion? So again, trauma impacts our window of tolerance, right? So if I'm afraid of cars now as a result of my accident, my window of tolerance for traveling in a car is going to be really tiny. And as soon as I get in a car, I might start hyperventilating and be in that hyper aroused state right away. Okay. And it's also going to lower my ability or decrease my ability to regulate my emotion, right? Because I'm so much in this hyper aroused state as a result of what happened to me and how I processed it, that I'm not going to be able to regulate my emotion. And so I might yell at the person who's driving the car, or I might get really upset at my spouse because I'm so frustrated that I can't drive anymore. Okay, so it comes out in really interesting ways how we're responding to the trauma inside of us. So I want to pause here just for a moment and see if there are any questions about everything I just shared, because I just said a lot of words. Good to continue? Okay. So now I'm going to continue with trauma sensitive yoga. And so trauma sensitive yoga was developed by the Trauma Center, which is a program for the Center for Trauma and Embodiment up in Massachusetts. And it was developed to address the embodied trauma, right? So the trauma that is living in our body, how do we reconnect with our body in a way that feels safe and authentic, right? So again, going to that car accident, maybe I feel very unsafe in my body because my body didn't keep me safe during that accident, right? Maybe I got really banged up, or I thought I was going to die. And so now I don't trust my body, right? And so trauma sensitive yoga is going to help me reconnect with my body in a way that feels safe in the present moment. I love this quote by Judith Herman. She was a doctor and she studied veterans, right, with a lot of PTSD and victims of domestic violence. And one of the things that she really concludes is that no intervention that takes power away from the survivor can possibly foster their recovery, no matter how much it appears to be in their immediate best interest. This is important to remember because many times when we go maybe see a therapist, we feel like they're talking at us or they're telling us what to do. And, you know, there are best intentions, right? But with trauma, we really need to feel like we are taking charge of our recovery. And we might not even know that consciously, but subconsciously, because we lost power as a victim of trauma, whether it's been through neglect, abuse, one specific incident, right? We lost control, we lost autonomy. And so really, if I want to recover from that traumatic experience, I have to feel like I'm autonomous. And that's what Judith Herman really highlights in her work, is that any type of intervention that wants to support someone that has experienced trauma, the person has to be in control. Okay, and so remember that as we're going through the trauma sensitive yoga slides, this is all about the individual staying in control. You retain the power. Okay, you have the power to heal, and everyone that is supporting you around it, they're just walking alongside you in this journey, but you have the control. And so the four main components of trauma sensitive yoga, the first one is invites interoception. I'm going to speak on this in just a moment, but we really call interoception the sixth sense. So we have our five senses, right? Hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and tasting, touching. Which one did I? Tasting, hearing. Mary, help me out here.
I think it was tasting.
Tasting, okay. So we have our five senses. And so the sixth sense is interoception, and that comes from within, okay? Using invitational language. So this is all about you. You have the choice to participate or not. and here, and then the third part ties into the invitational language, options, right? So in trauma sensitive yoga, you will always have options. So you get to make the choice, right? You get to decide how you want to move your body, if you want to move your body, okay? So you'll have choices, you'll have options, and it'll all be through invitational language, never a command, never you must, or this is what you have to do, right? And we are going to have a shared authentic experience, right? And so in trauma sensitive yoga, there is no teacher or student, but rather I will be a facilitator and you will be a participant, right? And so it's a flatter power dynamic, right? So there's no power over in trauma sensitive yoga. And so just touching on each point a little bit more, interoception is a sense that provides information about the internal conditions of our body, how our body is feeling on the inside. Interoception allows us to experience many body sensations, such as a growling stomach, dry mouth, tense muscles, or racing heart. So maybe if you think back to that mindful moment we had, maybe you noticed something that you weren't noticing before that. Sometimes when I do that exercise with my clients, they might notice that they have to use the bathroom. And so they'll say, oh, I need to use the bathroom now. Or they might notice that they're thirsty or they're hungry or that they were holding a lot of tension in their shoulders, okay? So that's interoception. So our bodies are always talking to us, but we are not paying attention because we are so caught up in our head. And that's also what trauma does, right? We pull out of our bodies because we don't feel safe in our bodies. So we go into our minds because our minds feel like we control them, right? We can think about this, we can think about that, but our bodies don't feel safe. And so interoception really invites you to drop back into your body. Also, when you think about trauma, something external happened to you. So that creates that hypervigilance, right? Especially those of us who grew up in homes where parents may have been dysregulated, either because of mental health or addiction or financial stressors. And so we were always like, is mommy going to be mad or happy? Is daddy going to be happy or angry? Who's going to walk through the door tonight? And that hypervigilance shuts down interoception because we cannot pay attention to ourselves internally and externally simultaneously. And the external is always going to win, right? And so recognizing that some of us have this interoceptive sense turned off. And so trauma sensitive yoga is helping us turn it back on. So again, that invitational language, you're going to notice some of the words that I use, but it's really about saying things like, if you're ready, maybe, you might want to, you're welcome to, possibly, perhaps. And it might sound a little strange to you if you've done other yoga classes, right? And so I invite you to hold space for something different. You may not be accustomed to hearing this type of language, but just notice how your body receives that. Okay, so I'll be really curious to see or hear how you experienced that invitational language. And then along with that invitational language are choices. And two questions that I've posed here that are difficult to answer for people that have a lot of trauma or history of trauma is, what is most conducive to survival? So what that basically means is, what do you need to survive? Because we are wired to live, right? So we come out of the womb like kicking and screaming, most of us, right? There's this innate desire to live. And so sometimes when we experience a lot of trauma, we go into that fawn state of total collapse. And so then we just don't know, right? And so that is question number one. And then the second question, which is really tricky for a lot of my clients, and it might be for some of the people that you work with or in your own life, but this question of, what do I want? Like really authentically, what do you want in this moment? And so as you're practicing with me tonight, I invite you to ask yourself, what do I want in this moment? Do I want to move? Do I want to stay still? What do I want? And then finally, this is such a beautiful part of trauma sensitive yoga, is the shared authentic relationship. So there's multiple types of trauma, and this one is really about interpersonal trauma, or some of you may know this as CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But because it's interpersonal, the trauma is happening between people, right? Either a parent and a child, a perpetrator and a victim, right? And so we know that it happens between people. So then it has to heal between people. And this is almost anti-American, dare I say, because Americans are so like, I'm going to do this by myself, right? I'm going to get this done by myself. And really what this is saying is, no, you need other people, right? One of the things that I like to tell people in recovery, I'm in recovery myself, and I like to say, like, nobody recovers alone, right? It is so hard to come out of addiction, and we really need to lean on each other. And so the more that we can lean on others, we can heal the trauma from others, right? And so in trauma sensitive yoga, you and I are having a shared authentic moment. I am not the teacher, you are not the student. We are doing this together. I'm offering some options, but you're going to do what you need to do in your body in this moment. And I'm going to hold space for that, right? And so whatever comes up for you, that is what comes up, right? And so if we can feel it, we can heal it. And that's such an important part of recovery. Okay, so now I'm going to pause one more time before we go into our practice, and I'm going to move my computer while I check in if there's any questions or comments.
Okay. Ruthie, I suggest that you stop sharing while you do this.
Okay, so stop sharing my screen. I can do that. Okay, there we go. All right, so everyone can see me okay. I'm going to tilt my camera down a little bit so you can see. So all I have is a little mat on the floor, but you don't need a mat. And you can also stay seated on a chair if you like. This is completely your time, like I said. If you want to lay down, you can lay down. You can close your eyes. You can keep your eyes open. But this is really an opportunity. Am I cutting my hair off? This is an opportunity for us to spend some time together, okay? So option here, to take a soft gaze towards the ground, close your eyes, keep them open. You can sit cross-legged on the ground. You can stay in your chair, but begin to notice your body in this moment. And you may do that by maybe moving, starting to move your body. Maybe you begin to invite some gentle rocking into your body. And this movement can be side to side. Or maybe you want to rock forward and backwards. And as you're inviting this movement, maybe you begin to notice how you're seated on the ground or your chair. Maybe you notice your body making contact with the ground or your chair. Maybe you begin to invite some bigger movements, maybe some circular movement to one side. And the pace of your moves, completely up to you, how deep you choose to move. And you may choose stillness in this moment, right? Maybe this is the first time that you're able to sit still. And so if you're circling your body, maybe you explore one direction and then you begin to explore the other direction. Maybe you notice sensations of tightness or even discomfort in your hips. If you've been sitting all day, maybe you notice your lower back. And so we'll just stay here for a few more moments. Moving into circles. And then in your own time, coming back to maybe stillness. And from here, maybe you invite your shoulders to move. You may want to begin to do some shoulder rolls. So bringing your shoulders up towards your ears and then rolling them back. As I'm doing this, I'm noticing some sensation in my upper back. Option here to move one shoulder at a time. Or you can do both together. And then if you're moving your shoulders up and back, maybe you start shifting and moving them forward, rotating your shoulders up and forward. And if you like, you can squeeze and hold at the top and then roll, allowing yourself to explore movement. If you want, you can put your hands on your shoulders and bring them along for the ride. So sometimes I say, I feel like I'm making little wings. And you can roll backwards. Forward. As you're moving, notice if you start thinking, am I doing this right? Right? We really love the binary, but in this practice, there is no right or wrong, right? And so try to see if you can hold space for just what is and how you're moving. And then from here, maybe you drop one hand down to the ground, or if you're on your chair, you can just put it to your side and then begin to stretch up and over the other side. So many things are popping. Yes, we like popping, as long as it doesn't hurt. So one thing, if something hurts, pull away, right? This isn't no pain, no gain. That's very American. But again, this is about your body. And if your body's saying, ouch, you want to tell your body, I hear you. I'm not going to do that anymore, right? When we respond to the messages our bodies are giving us, we're saying, I hear you. You matter, right? When we push through the pain, we're saying, oh, my mind knows more than my body. And so from here, you may want to stay on the side stretching, and that you may feel that sensation on the side of your body, right? Like a pulling sensation. And then you might want to come over to the other side. So dropping that hand down and then bringing your other arm up and over. And again, you may notice a sensation of stretching on the side of your body. And if you don't, that's completely fine too. And then from here, you can stay stretching in a static stretch or option to make it a dynamic movement. So beginning to move from side to side. And again, this is at your own pace. Your option to look up over your arm towards the ceiling. So maybe you're gazing upward if you like. Maybe your eyes are still closed. Maybe you're looking down towards the ground. Or maybe you're doing a completely different stretch. And we'll just stay here for a few more seconds. And then in your own time, coming back to stillness. And whenever I move my body like that, sometimes I'll check in with my breath, right? And so option to just take a moment to check in with your breath. Maybe you notice that you're breathing a little bit faster. Maybe you notice your breath is the same. No need to change it or control it, right? Just noticing, how am I breathing right now? And then from here, we're going to come up and give some attention to the neck. So your neck, another place where we hold a lot of tension. So option to bring your chin towards your chest, right? And as you bring your chin towards your chest, you may notice a pulling sensation in the back of your neck. And this may be enough for you tonight, right? Especially if we're sitting all day and staring at a screen, this might feel like, okay. Or you may want to begin to explore movement just by gently shifting your head side to side. So almost like you're windshield wipering your chest with your chin. I am going to clip my hair up so I can see you. And so gently moving your chin side to side.
And you might know what I'm going to suggest next, and you might already be doing it, but beginning to do some full circles with your chin and neck. So these are neck rolls, and for the person who said things are popping, I want to say that now I'm popping. And again, it's okay to pop as long as it doesn't hurt. And if you're exploring movement in one direction, maybe at some point you begin to explore movement in the opposite direction. And remember, the pace is yours, right? You may want to move your neck really fast, or you may want to move it really slow. This is completely up to you. And then once you've done a few neck rolls on both sides, if you like, option to begin to look towards your shoulder and then the other, right? So this is very similar to a shaking of your head, like no. And again, if you want to stay with the shoulder rolls, I mean the neck rolls, you can. Or if you'd like to start saying no, thank you, shaking your head side to side. And then maybe after you've said a few no's, we begin to nod the head. So starting to say yes, right? And so looking up, and maybe you pause as you look up. And then as you come back down, pause again. And so you may be noticing that pulling sensation or stretching sensation in the back of your neck. And then finally, you can do the ear to shoulder, right? So this is the I don't know. So ear to shoulder, ear to shoulder. You can even bring your shoulder to meet your ear if you like, completely optional, really shrugging like I have no idea. And as you're doing this movement, just check in with that question, right, that I posed earlier. What do I want in this moment? What do I want to do? Remember that stillness is always an option. And we'll just stay here for a few more. Okay. Now that we've moved our shoulders and our neck and our arms, maybe you take a big stretch, lifting arms up towards the ceiling. And then you can gaze up if you like. And then maybe you invite your arms to come down in front of you. And if you're seated on a chair, you can do this too, right? You can, if you want to just stay seated neutrally, or if you want to bring your hands all the way down to the ground, kind of like a forward fold, you can do that. But if you're on your mat or on the ground, right, all I'm doing is putting my hands on the floor. And you can, if you like, bring your head towards the ground as well, trying to maybe release any sensation of tightness or tension in the back of your neck. Your forehead does not have to come to the ground. And then if your legs are crossed like mine are, but this may not feel wonderful in your back or hips, then option to open up, right? And so here you can extend the legs and come forward. So lots of options here. And this is really about where you want to be tonight. So I'm going to shift the camera back up. And so I'm going to keep my legs extended. And so you may want to continue to explore this forward fold. Or if you'd like to turn towards one of your legs, it doesn't matter which one. And maybe you start to reach towards your foot. You do not have to grab your foot, okay? Maybe you grab your thigh or your calf. I try not to grab the knee just because it is a joint and it can be delicate, but you can grab any other part of your body. Maybe you go for your ankle. If you want to flex your toes towards you and grab your toes, maybe you invite your forehead towards your knee. And if you like, you can even bend your knee so that your forehead rests on your knee, right? You can bend. And from here, you can extend your leg, release that foot, calf, wherever you're grabbing on. You can stay on this side, or you can switch to your other leg, right? We've got two legs. And important to remember, your sides are different. And I think, some of you might notice when you cross your legs or do something with one leg and then the other. So you might feel different when you bend on your other side. All right, and that is not a you thing, that's an all of us thing. We all have one side that is maybe more flexible than the other. And so maybe noticing here, you might want to grab your thigh or your calf. And again, this isn't a good or bad. This is wherever you want to be tonight. Maybe you grab your ankle. You can flex or point your toes. I just checked in with my breath, right? Are you holding your breath? We can hold our breath a lot. And so it's helpful to remind ourselves to, how am I breathing right now? And whenever you're ready, pushing yourself back up. And then here, you can stay with your legs extended. I'm going to give you another option to continue to maybe stretch your hips a little. You can bring the soles of your feet to touch. And so if you're seated, you can't do that. And so here you may want to, you can cross your leg over your knee if you like, if you're seated on your chair. And that can also create a sensation in your hips. So if you're in a chair, you can bring your foot to your thigh or to your calf, if that's where your foot wants to be. But if you're on the ground, bringing the soles of your feet to touch, right? And so this is kind of like you're making a little box. And I think you can see pretty, yeah, and so your feet can touch, your knees do not need to touch the ground, okay? That is really difficult and most of us don't move that way. So this is perfectly fine for me. And from here, you could grab your feet or you could grab your calves. And then you may want to pull yourself up and maybe stretch that lower part of your back. Or you may want to invite some movement and just bouncing your legs a little bit. And again, as much or as little as you like, as deep as you would like. And then from here, whenever you're ready, coming back to stillness, maybe you extend one of those legs in front of you, and then the other leg can stay bent. Or if you'd like to cross it over that leg on the floor, so option to cross, option to keep it on the ground. If you're seated on a chair, you can do this just sitting down. So all we're going to do is we're going to turn towards that knee that's bent, right? So we're doing a little bit of a twist. And so you can do this seated on the ground. You can use that opposite hand to maybe hug that knee that's bent. Maybe it gives you a little bit more of a push or leverage. And notice maybe that sensation in your lower back. And again, pushing as much or as little as you like. From here, you can stay with that stretch, or if you would like to explore the other side, straightening that bent knee, and then bending the opposite leg. From here, you can keep it in front of you, or if you'd like to cross it over that extended leg, you can. Completely up to you. If you're seated in a chair, simply choose to turn towards the opposite side, right? And so now we're grabbing the opposite knee and we're twisting. Maybe you check in with your breath one more time. Checking in with the sensations that are coming up in your body. In trauma-sensitive yoga, silence is not a part of the practice. If you've noticed, I've been talking a lot, and that's intentional. For many of us, silence is very tempting for us to go back into our minds. And so the sound of someone's voice can be grounding to the present moment. Okay, and so releasing that stretch. So coming back to a comfortable seated position, again, you can cross your legs if you like, or if you'd like to kneel. We're going to end our practice now, so I'm going to kneel just to switch it up. And I did just pop my ankle. Well, pretty good actually. And so yeah, I'm going to kneel, but you can do cross-legged, or if you'd like to extend your legs, if you'd like to lay out on your mat. So I know that in many yoga classes, they end with people laying on a mat. But I'm going to invite us to take a moment to, again, notice your body, notice how you're feeling in this moment. Like, is there a feeling word that's coming up for you? And if not, that's okay. Maybe see if you can remember how you were feeling at the very beginning of this time together and now how you're feeling. Is there a difference? Is it the same? I know I am feeling more peaceful. And it is because of the time that I just spent with you doing these movements, right? I was a little bit anxious coming on this evening, just in all honesty, right? Presenting is a little anxiety provoking, but I can notice that in this moment, I feel very present. I feel calmer, and I also feel gratitude because I really enjoy sharing this practice and sharing this information with anyone who will listen. And with that, I would just like to thank Mary again for inviting me to be a part of this presentation tonight. And I'm going to share my screen one more time because there are a few things on here that I wanted to share with you. And so any questions or comments on the practice? And then here is a website if you would like to do more of these trauma-sensitive yoga practices. The Trauma Center offers classes. They are virtual, and you just need to fill out like a little form online, and then they will reach out to you and they do a very brief interview. It's nothing, it's like 5 minutes, and it's really just to ask some basic questions to make sure that you're in a place where you can do some trauma work, right? Because this is trauma sensitive yoga, and they just want to make sure that you haven't experienced like a recent traumatic event, because they don't want you to be practicing this being unsupported, right? So that's really all the interview entails. And then the cost is a donation. So whatever you can donate to the center for the cost, that is completely up to you, but they don't want barrier ability to pay to be a barrier to access this type of practice. And then I also like to just offer some other resources as a mental health clinician, right? Life is difficult. I am in recovery for both an eating disorder and alcohol abuse. And so I know that it is not easy to do life, and these resources are really helpful. So I encourage people to look at either Al-Anon or AA for 12-step work. Smart Recovery is an alternative to 12-step. Recovery Dharma is another alternative. So some people don't resonate with the 12 steps, and that's completely fine, but there are other options. The National Eating Disorders Association, NEDA, NAMI for mental health, and then S for sex addicts, as well as a 12-step program. And Psychology Today, for those of you in Idaho, you can find a therapist. I like Psychology Today. Most of us are listed there, and it tells you, you can search by gender, by insurance, by issue. So it's a really robust tool for searching for a therapist. And then if you or anyone you know is thinking about suicide or is in a crisis, please reach out for help. Don't struggle alone, right? There's the Crisis and Suicide Line, and also the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Domestic violence is very real in all communities, and it's not talked about enough. And so really want to encourage people to get the help that they need. And I think that's it. There's my contact information. If you have any other questions or would like to reach out to me, please, 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 you can email me, call me. That's also a texting number. And then there's my website if you'd like to find out more about my practice.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. What a wonderful presentation. I feel so calm, and I'm thinking that that's how everyone's feeling right now. I also would like to thank Fran Bennett, our ASL interpreter tonight. I neglected to introduce her at the beginning, and I apologize for that, Fran, but we appreciate you being here. I will send you an email tomorrow, as I said, with the survey link and the links that were included in this presentation. And Eden, if you put the slides link back up, we'd sure love you to fill out. It'll only take a few minutes to fill out our survey. Or I meant the survey link, not the slides. And so we'd really appreciate that. There, she's got that in the chat. If you have any direct questions, use the Empower Idaho email. That'll go in the chat right now too. And just remember, the slides and recording will be available on the website in a few days. And thank you all for attending. It was really a very special night. And there were an awful lot of thank yous in the chat. Thank you so much. This was a great session. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and skills with us.
You're welcome, Mary.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate it. And
have a great night, everyone.
And you can check out our other events on our website. I just put up that link, but I'll send that to you in the email tomorrow. So once again, everyone, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Good night, everyone.
Have a great night.